Hi, everybody. Thanks for being with us today. We appreciate it. And if you'll look on the screen, you'll see the smiling face of Mr. Joel Baker. Joel's with CoreLogic. Hi, Joel. Joel's with CoreLogic. He is specifically the senior professional product solution guy for CoreLogic. Now, Joel, you've been with CoreLogic, you told me, right around 19 years, right?
That's right, specifically with the Alamode business unit, even prior to the acquisition by CoreLogic.
Okay. All right. So you're familiar with all that good stuff that impacts appraisers every day. Now, Joel, you were also indicating to me that before you got into this, you were in the incredibly related to appraisal field of teaching high school. And then in high school, you taught music, drama, algebra. There's a great transition. And then you had taught at the community college level, you had taught logic and critical thinking. And to top it all off, you also sing opera. Is that correct?
That is true. I have been a professionally paid opera singer a few decades ago. It's been a while. But yeah, that's true.
Well, that's better than being an amateurly paid opera singer. So
that's true.
Joel, as we were talking about this earlier, part of what CoreLogic does is to keep appraisers on the cusp of what's happening technologically in appraisal world. And, things are changing ridiculously fast. While the protocols of appraisal haven't changed significantly in nearly 100 years, the way we apply those protocols is literally changing on a daily basis. So we've got to be able to keep up. So tell us, what has CoreLogic done? What is CoreLogic doing to allow appraisers to keep up with the technology, to produce appraisal reports efficiently without cutting corners, and most of all, to stay out of the clutches of state appraisal boards?
Well, that's the big one, isn't it? Is to not get called to the mats for something. No, it's we've been around for a while, and Alamode, even before CoreLogic existed, as well. Alamode has been a premier. I mean, if you've been in the industry for really any real length of time, you remember that Alamode has been around for coming up on 40 years at this point. And I've been with the company for almost 20 years. And when I started, just to take you, several of you down memory lane at this point, when I started, PDFs were like the new thing. And our flagship product, which we called Athena at the time, actually had an EDI center in it, which was, it was email, an email client in the product, because appraisers were it was new to them, this email thing, and having to print their reports to PDF. When I came on board, I mean, again, this was only 19 years ago, there were still about a third of the appraisers were printing reports, to printers and overnight FedExing the stuff to their clients on legal sheets of paper. I mean, how you buy the special envelopes and pay the overnight fees and glue stick the the pictures to the to your reports and send it out the door. But I think you're right, Tim. I mean, the protocols really haven't changed. When you go from a slide rule and a piece of graph paper into Excel, and then you go from Excel into a turnkey solution like Data Master or Spark or Titan Analytics, which is our product, you're not really changing the value of R squared when you're running analytics. I mean, that doesn't change. It's the how you get to it that really shifts. And of course, that's a big piece for a lot of appraisers, to be honest. One of the things that I have specialized in over the last, say, 12 or 15 years with Alamode has really been to help appraisers move to both a paperless and a mobile workflow. And mobile means something a little bit more specific to me, rather than this generalization that a lot of appraisers, when they step into my class, they sort of have this idea of what mobility is. But you got to keep in mind, more than half appraisers out there still carry around the clipboards, right? Way more than half, and they haven't moved to fully to digital. But I want you to remember also that many of them have moved part of that process to digital. There are, obviously a lot of appraisers that still have the point and shoot cameras, but some appraisers have moved to, to taking their iPhone, or this is the Pixel 6, by the way, that I personally use. And there's all different kinds of workflows to get pictures into the reports. And I'm talking about other than just like glue sticking a Polaroid onto a sheet of paper, or running down to the Moto Photo for the 1 hour or whatever. There's all kinds of pieces of the workflow that have been digitized, but there are some appraisers that they quite honestly, when they step into my classroom about mobility, I have to take a real step back and really start with just the definition of what mobility is. So let me give you an example of this. I'm going to just sort of to narrow this down into one really specific example. I have my laptop here that I'm using, and I can go out with my laptop to an inspection, and I can fill out the forms, right? I could fill out page 1 of the 1004 with my laptop. I can stand in front of my my subject property, and I can fill in and say this is concrete and check the box for slab. Those are all things that are doable with my laptop. It is not convenient. It is not helpful in any way to do that, obviously. But it makes the point that just because I can take what I'm doing at the office one way, maybe the old way, and sort of move that process wholesale out into the field and make that mobile, that doesn't actually make it mobile. What it does is it makes that portable. That process becomes portable. And so I make a really big distinction between mobility and portability. And the crux, the number one thing I like to talk about with mobility is access. Do you have access to the data? If you've ever seen me speak live, I've probably talked about these 2 points: data and process. I have to have access to my data, and I have to have access to do and complete my process wherever I am on whatever device I have. Well, that means different tools. And the moment I start talking about different tools with appraisers, as you probably well know, there's a lot of reticence and a lot of hesitation with appraisers just don't like change, generally speaking. And I totally understand that. I'm actually the same way. I don't like change very much at all. I have little tips and tricks in my own life to force myself to adopt the new thing and the new way of doing things. I just don't like change. And so I understand why appraisers wouldn't do that, and why they don't like changing the way that they've been doing it. And so I asked this question in class: have you ever, and I want everybody who's listening to this right now, I want you to, if you're a real estate appraiser, I want you to ask ask yourself this question in your head right now. Have you ever said to yourself, well, why change it why fix it if it ain't broke? Or why change this if it's already working for me? Or that works, so why fix it? Right? This works well enough for me. And while that is valid, and I'm not saying that you're a bad appraiser for using a clipboard and a pencil. Those are perfectly valid ways of appraising, obviously. But for many appraisers, there's a little bit of an efficiency to be gained, sometimes a lot of bit of efficiency to be gained by challenging that basic assumption and really boiling down and asking yourself one specific question. And it's this: when am I going to stop doing what works in order to do what works better, or what may work better? When am I going to stop doing what works in order to do what may work better? And sometimes you'll be successful, sometimes you won't be. And for example, some people, when they take my 7-hour CE course on mobility, which I teach through the Columbia Institute, used to teach it through All Mode and the Roadshow. Now I teach it through the Columbia Institute, and it's still available. I know I get people that ask for it from time to time. Quite honestly, there's about 5 or 6% of appraisers who I assume, just based on their body language and everything, that they decide, okay, this isn't going to be for me, which is completely understandable. I mean, every piece of technology is not going to be for everybody, but at least they've bothered to ask this question and interrogate themselves and say, when am I gonna stop doing what works? So some examples of this really break down into the components of an appraiser's work file, right? So one of the things that I like to do is, especially when I'm working one-on-one with an appraiser, I say, okay, let's make a list of everything that goes into your work file. And I don't care if you're still doing the physical manila folder with the post-it notes stuff, or if you're using like a manila folder virtually, maybe in Dropbox or somewhere on your computer. But there's generally a list of things that go in there, and it I think helps to just one at a time, piecemeal, interrogate each one of those items, and see, how can I originate this electronically, and then how can I store it electronically in such a way that I then have access to it. Access, this is now the second time I brought this up, because again, mobility really is about access. So let's say that I'm at the subject property, and I go inside, and the seller's realtor or the seller has a piece of paper on the counter with a list of updates. Right now, I could do what we did 30 years ago, which is take that with me, and then maybe scan it in back at the office. What a lot of appraisers do now is they take their phone and they just take a picture of it, or they do that at the office. But here's my question. When I take a picture of something, of a piece of paper, I have that on my camera, or I have that on my phone. Am I really mobile with that? Or have I just made that image portable? Right? So maybe that piece of paper needs to go somewhere else. And unless I have done some setup somewhere else, like used Dropbox or saved it to iCloud or any of the, the various tools that are out there to do this, unless I have done something else, the only place to see that is on my camera or on my phone where I took that picture. I've taken that scanning process and I've just made it portable. I haven't actually made it mobile, because I may need to access this on my camera or on my phone while I'm doing my analysis. And obviously then that needs to go into my digital work file so that I'm, cooperating with the record keeping rule for USPAP. And all of those take place because I can take the photo off of my phone or off of my camera, and I can put it on my computer, and then I can put it in my work file. But regardless of where I am, I need to have access to it. One of the things, and what I'm going to do here real quick, if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And what I've got here, Tim, is I've got this is my total program. Some of your people are probably used to it. Let me see if I can do that one more time, see if I get it.
You had it up there.
There we go. It was giving me a weird thing on my screen, but now we appear to be good. Okay, so I'm here in total, and I'm looking at comparables.
Okay.
Over here on the side is a tab called the work file. And this is built into every file inside of Total. Obviously, every appraiser needs to have a work file. What we've done is we've just taken that and made it entirely digital wherever possible. And an appraiser can take, in our software anyway, can take something that they have that's electronic, that was generated electronically, emails, PDFs, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, screenshots they took of the assessor's website or whatever, right? And they can literally drag it and drop it over here on this side. And what this does is it takes your entire file, at least for our product anyway, it takes all of these little bits and pieces and combines them into one file, so that when you move that file, or when you back it up to the cloud, or when you move it to the cloud so that you can access it through the Titan product line, all of this data is there. So that, for instance, let's take one specific example here that I've got this is the contract that the seller's realtor sent me in an email. If I'm on, in just to pick a place at random, San Miguel de Indy, Mexico, on vacation with my family, and I get, a client who's screaming at me about a particular question about, something about the concessions for this report that I did 2 weeks ago. Now they're going to closing, or the underwriters freaking out, or whatever the case may be. I'm not taking my computer on vacation with me. I know some appraisers do, so they can just specifically so they can handle stuff like this. But the fact that when I was looking at this contract to begin with, the fact that I put it here in my work file, and that I have access to it in total, and the fact that I have also backed that up to the cloud, with the Titan product line, means that I can go down to the business center of the hotel, wherever I'm staying at, go to titanappraisal.com, and I can see this document. I can make changes to my file and hyphenate the borrower's last name and redeliver to appraisal portal, or wherever else that the client needs it to go. Again, it's access. I've got to have the ability to have access to the data that I need, the contract, and the process, the ability to modify the report and redeliver. And the cloud products that are a lot of times ancillary to the flagship total product, really make that useful to an appraiser. And I will just say to those of you who are my customers right now, obviously, thank you for being my customer. But also every one of you has access to Titan reports in the cloud. If you have a current contract with us, every one of you has access to Titan reports. And I encourage you to check that out and see if you also need Titan Drive, which is part and parcel of what I've just described here. So this is, again, this is access to data. This is access to process. And it's sort of an extension of what appraisers were doing. I mean, this is a direct 2022 extension, or, I mean, we've had this for forever. So 2015 extension to, the process of the manila folder, of actually having that manila folder in your hand and taking it with you, so that you have access to that data, and then you can do what you need to do wherever you are. This is the cloud-based electronic version of that process. It's the data and it's the process. The other piece that I wanted to mention, and I'm going to, if you have a question, this is a good.
Yeah, let me jump in here. Now you're showing the Destin, Florida zoning map. I'm generally, well, can you go back to it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Now I do have to admit that Florida is really good about having all this stuff online, and Florida is a full disclosure state. So this stuff is easily available for free. So what you're saying is and you just downloaded this from the city's webpage. Mm-hmm. So you've got a complete map. You can zoom in on it as you need to. And then, let's take that property. Of course, you can't see my cursor on the screen, but lot number 6. So you can take that up, and there you've got the length, the frontage, which is about 64 feet. You can get the depth, and then you've got the GIS coordinates. So if somebody says, all right, how did you get I've always thought that my lot was 69 feet across the front. You're saying it's only 63.98 feet across the front. And you can say, well, I don't know which one's right, but this one's authoritative, and therefore that's the one I used. So what you're saying is little details like this are what keep the state appraisal board at bay. And I deal a lot with state appraisal boards, and you want to keep them at bay if you possibly can. So this is just merely one detail of what is available to you should you choose to use a total and maintain all of your data in a portability, or excuse me, in a mobile standpoint,
There you go.
rather than merely a portability standpoint, right?
That's right. And of course, a lot of appraisers have been doing this manually, physically, on sheets of paper and post-it notes. Don't tell me y'all aren't using post-it notes. I've been in your offices. I know what your desks and your monitors look like. I mean, I've got post-it notes all over here on my desk too, just because that's the nature of the nature of the game. But yeah, this has been the process. It's just taking what was a physical thing where you would handwrite a note or circle something or whatever, and then maybe scan it in. This is just like the next evolutionary step of that. But it gives freedom to the appraiser to access this wherever. On top of that, I should also mention I love the fact that there are some appraisers that take all kinds of notes about this stuff. I've got a lot of attorneys in my family, and sort of like the mantra that I've heard growing up is that when it comes to court work, the person with the best notes wins, or the best note, the best notes are the most notes. And I know a lot of appraisers that don't take really great notes, but there's lots of ways to do this. Total gives you the ability to do all kinds of note taking. There is even let me go ahead and just, if you don't mind, I'm going to go back to the forms view of this. I'll just demonstrate one little extra piece because we're talking specifically about post-it notes. There's a way for me to make an internal note to myself, or if I work with other appraisers in the office, I can make a note to them for internal communication. This is not stuff that ever goes to the client, but I can actually, have this little electronic post-it note and just, I'm just going to type a little bit. I type this in for myself here to remind me to do something, or remind me that I did something, right? So this is just an electronic replacement for something that we've been doing for 20, 30 years, right? It's just the next step. It's the mobile step to take that physical manual process and move it to the cloud. So this is again, this is the digital work file in here. And again, you can drag and drop anything you want to. There are appraisers that have the little recorders, the voice recorders that they go out and take out in the field as they walk around and talk about things. You can drag and drop that MP3 file in here. Absolutely. If you download files out of the like Excel files or whatever out of your MLS, put that in here. And of course, even the appraisers that use our other products, things like Titan Analytics and Quick Source, when you do utilize products that ingest data from other sources like the MLS or public records, those products actually do create work file items. So for instance, Quick Source, which is the product that combines MLS data with public records data with peer data out of the voluntary peer database, as well as the actual appraiser's personal database on their computer. When the appraiser makes the choices about which pieces of data to use, the product itself actually creates a file out of that, puts it into the digital work file. So there's a PDF of this is what I used, followed by immediately this is all the data from all of the other sources that I didn't use. And a lot of appraisers have to go through right now. They've got to go through a process of printing everything to PDF, right? If you're on the assessor's website and you're looking stuff up manually, one parcel at a time, file, print to PDF, save over here, and then you got to manually do it. You can do that for 6, 8, properties per report. Quite often, that's thousands a year. And so in order to have access to that, there's a lot of a manual process that goes on for appraisers. Some of appraisers will actually do that to, like the hot sheets for the MLS, still print it all out physically. And then like take it out the field and write notes on it, And so this is the work file gives the appraiser the ability to do all of that electronically in lots of different ways, depending on how the data comes in originally.
Joe, go back a minute. You were talking about stuff you didn't do. That can be important, especially now that the issue of bias and prejudice and discrimination and a disparate impact are coming to the fore. So talk to us about why, under certain conditions, it might be important to record what you didn't do as part of a scope of work.
Well, we're actually starting to see that at the moment. A lot of appraisers are starting to. I mean, this there are so many bits and pieces of this, obviously. But because I mentioned the MLS, let's go back to that one. A lot of appraisers are getting requests about, well, why didn't you use this property, or why didn't you use that property as a, as a comparable? And sometimes you're going to comment on that. Sometimes you're not. You're just going to let it pass on. Sometimes you miss a comp, right? Because it's at some assumption you made when you did your original MLS search excluded that particular property for whatever reason. Maybe the data in the MLS itself was wrong to begin with, which is not an uncommon thing, quite honestly. But now we're starting to see and have been asked by appraisers here at Alamo. We've been asked for, hey, is there a form where I can put the considered comparables, considered properties, or what? I mean, there's several different terms for it, so that I can send that to my client. And of course, some folks even do this here. Like, this is again an example that I put together, like I guess now almost 9 years ago, that's built into the sample file. These are the considered sales out of the MLS. These are the ones I considered. Now, it doesn't have any commentary on what I did or didn't do, but I'll be quite honest, it wouldn't shock me to see in the next few years if we don't see an increase in clients or investors actually, specifically asking for this information. Maybe not just about the MLS, but about other stuff as well. Did you, why these were, 25 properties? Why wasn't this one? Give me 2 or 3 words about why this one, too big, or no pool, or whatever the limiting factor was for not including that as a particular comparable. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. This is something that I think is the next organic thing that comes from all of these pressures about the reconsiderations of value, all the way up through bias. You know what I mean? This is
Yes.
These are the natural, organic way of the market figuring out the market as far as the product that the appraisers produce, right? I'm speaking in general terms there, specifically about that. That's just the evolution, I think, of where it's going to end up having to go, is more commentary about what you didn't do. So yeah, that's a great question.
Yes.
And I think a few years ahead of its time, even.
We're very close to that. And it is going to become even more and more important in the future. Scope of work well, it is now, but it will become even more important, not merely what you did to come up with a credible value opinion and why, but what you chose not to do and why. Yeah, that's going to become extremely important.
Absolutely, I agree. You and I will have this conversation here in 10 years. We'll be like, oh, we saw that coming.
We're probably not gonna have to wait 10 years, Joel. We're gonna see it come a lot. We're gonna see it come a lot faster than that, unfortunately. But yeah, we will.
All right. Well, do you have any questions about the or anything that you think maybe you'd want me to go over in regards to the mobility stuff again? Anything specifically that you're
Joel, from a standpoint of, okay, you've got everything electronically here. I mean, you've got your sticky notes, you got your maps. You were sitting in a takeout restaurant waiting for your order, and a broker called you back to confirm some data, and you wrote it on the back of the menu, and you scanned that into your work file. Okay, now that's fine. That is USPAP compliant, quite frankly. Now I'm going to say however, because there's always a however. Many states say, okay, we don't care what particularly USPAP says. We just assume that you've got everything that we want to see in your work file on a piece of paper. And therefore, when we say, send us your work file, we want one download, and we don't want any references to a report that one of your associates did 5 years ago that you got tucked in a file you hope somewhere in a basement. We want to see paper within the wings of a manila folder. And if you can't send that to us, there are going to be some unhappy days and sleepless nights. So you say, okay, great, you got it all here. All I got to do is download it. So, and looking at nothing more than this file you have here, which may be typical of the quantity of data in a work file, it may not be, I don't know. But assuming you had to turn all of this into paper, basically, how long would that take?
However long it takes to open each one and do file print. I kind of figured this is where this question was going. So let me give you an example here. Each of these opens in their own native application, right? So when I double click on this PDF, it opens in the Adobe PDF. When I double click on this email, which was literally dragged out of Outlook, you can see that this is the original email, and it opens as an Outlook email in my current Outlook. And if there were attachments in it, like if there were a PDF in here or a TIFF or something like that, like the engagement letter or whatever, then I would be able to see that within here as well. I do file print just from each one of these to print them individually from their native application without having to go through some other data transformation. Does that make sense? PDFs open in PDF, Word docs open in Word, Excel documents open in Excel.
So in other words, you could say to your secretary, the state wants this printed. I got appraisals to do, and that's a whole lot more important than printing papers for the state. So it not only is it easy to do, it's just a matter of clicking it open, file print, clicking it close, and moving on to the next one. Is that right?
That's absolutely right.
So you're limited basically by the amount of paper in your printer and the size of your ink cartridge.
That's right, and you're not limited by your memory of where you put a piece of paper to go drag it out and photocopy it, right? Oh, I know where that is. That's in a file that's in the bottom of a locked file cabinet that's in the basement in a in a disused bathroom with a sign on the door that says "Beware of the leopard." Right. I've seen y'all's offices. I know that there's stacks and stacks of papers, and there's file boxes on top of file cabinets with a stack. I know where that is. I'll get to it. I know where everything is. I got a system. Until the state calls. And then you're like, I know I took that picture. I know I did. Well, that's going to be on my iCloud account. And let's see, now I got to go look in my iCloud account on a particular, forget that. You need everything in one place. You needed access to everything for that file, and you need it in one place. Let me give a really specific example, if you don't mind. I'm going to backtrack 3 minutes here to when we talked about what we did or didn't include. One of the things that I've always loved about the form filling product total that we have here is that when I go to remove a comparable, like say this one just doesn't cut the mustard, when I hit delete, it asks if I want to save this comp to my work file. And if I choose to do so, then it pulls that comp out of the file, including the photo that I may have taken for it, and it puts it into my digital work file, so that I can see the work that I did for that comparable. And I can even go to the work file if I need to and make notes on it and say, well, this one didn't cut the mustard because it's too far away, or it didn't have a pool, or it has a super adequacy or something, right? I can make some sort of comment about that particular comparable. So here's the one that I removed. Here's the grid for it. And then I make a comment on it if I want to. Does that make sense? This is just a paper trail, but it's entirely electronic.
Right.
So that I don't care if I get audited. All I got to do is print this, and I'm done. Right. This is my audit trail is in one place for the state.
The a couple of years ago, I did a study here in Florida, and this happened to be 2019, which was the latest year I could get all the data for. And I did a study of appraisers who had had their license revoked, not including those who gave it up for whatever reason. But what I found was almost 50% of the people who had their license revoked had it revoked because they couldn't or wouldn't produce their work file to the state. So that's extremely important. Now, Joel, as we're getting ready to wrap this thing up, from a standpoint of a peek into your crystal ball, if you possibly can. Of course, you know, all big companies have a crystal ball. I was going to use the plural, but decided not to. All big companies have a big crystal ball into which they can peek in order to discern the future. So as you and everybody else there at Wind Total take a look at the crystal ball, I can see it right behind you. What is it that you see coming in the next 12 and 24 and 36 months, as long as, of course, you're not giving up any, you know, corporate proprietary data?
Ooh, well, man, I do see a lot. If this were 2 months ago, I would be talking about, oh, I see ANSI coming from Fannie Mae. But now all of a sudden that's passe at this point. I mean, everybody's talking about ANSI ad nauseum at this particular moment in time, anyway, because it's just out and there's a new one, and it still isn't required yet at this point. Anyway, we're going to see Fannie Mae has announced that they are going to have changes to, obviously I can't talk about what they are, but they're going to have changes to certain products. And they've announced changes that they're going to have changes to things like the desktop and to bifurcation maybe, and the new UAD forms redesign type of thing. And of all of those things, my personal, this isn't a CoreLogic thing or even an Alamo thing. This is just a Joel Baker thing. I personally think that likely the biggest thing on an appraiser's plate over the next, say, 5 to 10 years from the GSEs in particular is going to be the forms redesign project. And if anybody was involved with the bifurcation stuff and actually walked through that process of having a form that wasn't an actual form, this is sort of what I expect it to perhaps look like. Now, keep in mind, we're ways off from this. I mean, years. And I mean, mostly just because Fannie, they continue to push out the the dates on this. They continue to kick that can down the road because they don't even know what they want yet, let alone how they're going to go about getting it. But one of the things that personally I expect to have happen is that we're not gonna have what you see is what you get, really forms like what we're used to, where you can say, all right, go to the location field, which is 1/3 of the way down on page 2 of the 1004. That's just not going to happen anymore. Forms are going to end up being dynamic. So when you see something odd about about a subject property while you're there, some sort of deficiency, like say the windows, you notice that they're casement, but you say that they're cracked. Well, all of a sudden, rather than saying repairs needed on page 1 at the bottom in the improvement section, and then having to make a comment on that in the addendum, and then take a picture on it, put it in, a photograph addendum later on down in the report. So a human reviewer has to look in 3 different places to really suss out what's actually going on. What you're going to see is the form will become dynamic, and it'll all of a sudden it'll pop out. It'll say, all right, now make your comment about it, and now show us the photo, and it'll put all of that together on the same place. That's kind of what I imagine is really where the forms might go. That would be my expectation. And so the way that an appraiser does the inspection will change, right? Because the number of questions will change based on what's on the property. Like you may not need a photo of the windows if they're not broken. Does that make sense? Anyway, that's sort of a summation of of my crystal ball for that.
Joel, not only does it make sense, it also makes you wonder, well, why haven't they done that now? But that would be too logical and too easy, and it would make that part of appraising too much fun, which is probably why the GSEs haven't done it. Well, Joel, thank you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your expertise. Appreciate your smile and your laugh too. So
thanks for having me on, Tim.
Joel, if somebody wanted to, oh, sure, it's my pleasure. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that? What's your email address?
Oh, my email address is just my name, Joel Baker, JoelBaker @CoreLogic.com.
No dots, just Joel Baker at
just
CoreLogic.com.
my whole name right there, Joel Baker @CoreLogic.com.
Very good. All right, well, Joel, we appreciate it. I look forward to the next time I get to shake your hand, and please let me extend my best to you and your family. Thanks, Joel.
Same. Thank you, sir.
And I think at this point, we're clear. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.